Today, we visit the small town of Santa Isabel on the south coast of Puerto Rico. We'll take a look at the center of town, the surrounding barrios, and the one thing that distinguishes modern-day Santa Isabel at the Caribbean level. All that and more in our next episode. If you're coming to Puerto Rico, you'll probably land in San Juan Airport. You'll probably want to visit Old San Juan and one or more of Puerto Rico's excellent beaches. But what will you do when you arrive in the old city? What will you visit? What'll you miss? And how about the beaches? How do you know which ones are the best and which you should avoid altogether? And more importantly, why? That's why I wrote the Old San Juan Walking Tour in Puerto Rico Beach by Beach, the ultimate guides to Puerto Rico's most beautiful city and most wonderful beaches. But I'm not going to tell you all about them now because that's not why you're here. Just visit the links on screen and find out all about them. We're back. After taking a month off to cover the kickoff of the world-famous Fiestas de la Calle San Sebastián, celebrated last month in Old San Juan, Puerto Rico, my wife and I are back exploring the island one town at a time. And we've done pretty good so far, if I may say so myself. If you split the island straight down the middle, from north to south, we've covered every town east of that imaginary line. And of course, all those videos are available right here on Puerto Rico by GPS's YouTube channel. There are also extended blog articles with hundreds of pictures and copies of our videos on puertoricobygps.com. Santa Isabel is a 77 square mile town west of Salinas, south of Coamo, and east of Juana Diaz. And if by any chance none of those towns rings a bell, it's just a stone's throw east of Ponce, Puerto Rico's second most important city. Santa Isabel was founded on October 5, 1842, when it separated from Coamo, Puerto Rico's third oldest town. During its early years, Santa Isabel was an agricultural powerhouse, combining slave-driven sugar plantations and smaller haciendas that produced minor crops. With the abolition of slavery on March 22, 1873, and the arrival of the United States just 25 years later, sugarcane became pretty much the only crop on the island, and the entire municipality slowly moved to a monopolistic town company model. Even though both the slave-driven Spanish model and the more subdued company town model brought by the United States are essentially both forms of slavery, it's still interesting to see how many locals reminisce about the sugarcane era with a certain degree of nostalgia. There are two main ways to get to Santa Isabel when coming from San Juan. Both of them involve the PR-52 expressway that goes between San Juan and Ponce. You can either take exit 65, cut through the town of Salinas, and then follow PR1 along the shore straight to Santa Isabel, or you can take the next exit, probably number 66, and arrive from the north of town. We took the Salinas route since it's a little more scenic. We arrived in Santa Isabel at 9:15 a.m. on the morning of February 3rd. The weather lady had announced a sunny day with occasional showers, and that's exactly what we got. My late father used to call that winter weather, where you get a couple of hours of sunshine followed by an occasional shower all through the day. Sun and rain, sun and rain, sun and rain. Not exactly what they call winter weather in Montana, though. When we arrived, I noticed that the Catholic Church was closed, so we went straight to City Hall instead. If you've been watching this channel for some time, you'll probably know by now that my first stop is always at the Catholic Church. Many Catholic priests celebrate Mass early in the morning and later close their temples for the day. Years ago, temples would be open round the clock, but crime, vandalism, budgetary and personnel restrictions have all forced ecclesiastical authorities to close some churches during the day. The Church of St. James the Apostle, better known among the locals as Parroquia Santiago Apóstol, is located on the east side of La Plaza de los Fundadores, Santa Isabel's main square. In Spanish colonial times, Catholic churches were built on the east side of the main square, and City Hall was generally on the west end. Many towns follow this tradition to a T, but some deviate, sometimes significantly. This always gets me thinking, why? It couldn't be land restrictions. After all, at the moment when those structures were built, there was nothing else around, so they could have done whatever they pleased, right? Well, in Santa Isabel, the Catholic Church is on the eastern side of the square. That means that the altar also points east like it's supposed to. But that's about all I can tell you about it because the temple was closed, and it remained closed during the entire day. We tried the parish office to see if there was someone that could show us the interior of the temple, but that too was closed. Back when I started this series in January of 2023, we approached municipalities to have them provide someone who could show us around town. That way, we could cover each town in the best possible light. But as governments will often do, most of them ignored us. So we decided to do what regular tourists will do. We simply drop by, inform on what we find, and let the chips fall where they may. No contacts, no privileges, just the fact-based experience. When we arrived at City Hall, we were referred to a man called Jaime Romero, who dedicated the better half of his morning showing us around town. There's a lot of history in Santa Isabel that doesn't meet the eye. For example, many of the huge buildings surrounding the Plaza de los Fundadores were once giant homes owned by the town's well-to-do. Today, many of those structures languish under the hot Caribbean sun, and like in most towns, huge shopping centers suck the life out of the town center. But that's nothing new either. It happens in every town where the economic welfare of the few prevails over that of the many. La Plaza de los Fundadores is a huge square that used to be covered in trees. But according to our host, Hurricane Maria destroyed most of them and the rest were removed during the latest remodeling. Today, only a few smaller trees remain and the rest of the square is covered in tile and concrete. Being that it was the third day of February, the temperature was around 80 degrees Fahrenheit, but I can't imagine what it would be like in the middle of August. Finally, on the southeast end of the square, there's an obelisk honoring the town's heroes who have died during different U.S. wars. It also honors Captain María Inés Ortiz Santiago, a town nurse killed during the Iran conflict of 2003. And in case you're wondering, City Hall is on the northeast corner of La Plaza de los Fundadores. It's a recently restored building that I can only assume was built during the late 19th century or early 20th century. And I'm quite aware of what they say about assuming, but believe me, I looked everywhere and I couldn't find the year when it was built. I also tried dialing the Santa Isabel switchboard, but the calls wouldn't go through. After leaving town, my wife and I drove to the Malecón area. By now, you must know that the word Malecón means waterfront in Spanish. It's a walk along the shore, peppered with restaurants and a great view. Well, sort of. Like many other coastal towns in Puerto Rico, the government has allowed uncontrolled, even illegal, urban sprawl along the coast, to the point where you can't even see or reach the water. A little after you pass the Malecón, there's a second waterfront area that was supposed to become a fisherman's village. But instead, it has become another urban sprawl with expensive houses lining the seashore. And the fishermen? Very well, thank you. Oh, and in case you're wondering, the Malecón area is a weekend thing. Thank God we brought a couple of sandwiches in our cooler because every single place was closed. From the Malecón area, we drove over to Playa Clavelina. By now, you're probably asking yourself, why is this guy doing such a hatchet job on Santa Isabel, right? So I won't say a word about Playa Clavelina. I'll let you draw your own conclusions.
Bájame el viaje, te huele bicho, en la cara ya te ha dicho que tú eres feca, que todas son fecas.
There were two places left that we wanted to see in Santa Isabel. One was the ruins of Central Cortada, where most of Santa Isabel's sugarcane history took place, and the other was the Santa Isabel wind farm. But our host in town had told us that most of the sugarcane plantation had been destroyed by Hurricane Maria, so we decided to pass on the sugarcane mill and go straight to the wind farm. Of course, at the wind farm, we couldn't just walk right in unannounced, so instead I decided to fly the drone. That in itself proved to be quite challenging, as the darn thing just wouldn't take off. Santa Isabel is not an FAA restricted zone, so I suppose they have some kind of jammer protecting the facilities. In the end, I was able to take off and shoot some amazing footage. The Santa Isabel wind farm is currently the largest operation of its kind in the Caribbean. It has 44 wind turbines producing 2.3 megawatts each. That totals a capacity of 101.2 megawatts. Back in 2012, when the project began, I remember asking a friend of mine who's an expert in these things about the viability of this project. After all, we were all taught in school that the trade winds hit Puerto Rico mostly from the northeast. Given that the island has a central mountainous region that splits it in two, east to west, it would stand to reason that the mountains would actually block the wind and keep it from hitting the turbines on the southern coast. Well, as it turns out, most of the wind on the island is a combination of easterly and northeastern currents, and the mountains actually act as a funnel that steers the wind straight into the turbines. But there's a fly in the ointment. The Puerto Rican power grid is incapable of supporting that amount of incoming renewable power. So the people from the Santa Isabel solar wind farm are forced to dumb down their system to avoid blowing out the island's obsolete power grid. Believe me, I don't derive any pleasure from mentioning these absurdities. And sometimes it even sounds like I'm making things up. But it's just one more example of life in Puerto Rico. As for Santa Isabel, I guess it started as a farming town, and it's once again a farming town. Only now they farm the wind instead of the land, mostly. There are still some small farming efforts even under the turbines, but the major crop is electricity. After finally getting our drone to fly and capturing some nice aerial shots, we gathered our stuff and headed back to San Juan. And talking about San Juan, if you're planning to visit the old city, save yourself the hassle of traditional city tours. They're expensive, and you'll be herded along with people that won't necessarily share your interests. Instead, order the Old San Juan Walking Tour. It's packed with useful information about all the main attractions, as well as every GPS coordinate and 2 hours of exclusive online video. That way, you'll be able to visit before you visit and hit the ground running when you arrive in the old city. See you next time.